Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a really fascinating story. It's about a city that literally vanished from the map. It's a story where historical fact and powerful legend get all tangled up. So, let's start with a geographical riddle that might have you scratching your head. If you look at a map of Europe, you'll see this little patch of Russia called Kaliningrad. But wait, it's not connected to Russia at all. It's totally surrounded by the European Union. So how on earth did that happen? To figure it out, we've got to jump in the time machine. All right, so Section 1, a Russian island in Europe. To really get how this happened, we need to dive into this incredible, super dramatic story people tell about this place. It's a story that paints this region as, well, not just a piece of land, but as the ghost of an entire lost civilization. So there's this one popular lecture that frames the question like this, asking how you got this colony of Russians so far from home. Now, when you hear the word colony, that brings up all sorts of ideas, right? It's a really loaded term. So that's our first question. Is colony even the right word here? All right, let's get into it. A quick fact check, and boom, the technically correct term is exclave. So what's an exclave? It's basically a piece of a country that's geographically separate, but is still a fully constitutionally integrated part of that country. It's not a colony. Now, this might sound like we're just splitting hairs, but it's actually a huge clue. It's our first hint that the big, dramatic story we're about to unpack, well, it might not line up perfectly with the history books. Section 2, the legend of Prussia. So, to really understand this place, we have to look at what it used to be. Because before it was the Russian city of Kaliningrad, it was called Koningsberg. And Koningsberg was the capital, the very heart of a nation that doesn't even exist anymore, the powerful, influential Kingdom of Prussia. So according to this story, Prussia wasn't just some other European country. No. It was like the absolute peak of human civilization, a cultural and military giant. And its capital, Koningsberg, that was the crown jewel of the whole thing. And you can totally see why this story is so compelling when you look at the facts. I mean, Koningsberg was an absolute powerhouse of intellect. This is a city that gave us the philosopher Immanuel Kant. I mean, a guy who basically reshaped all of Western thought. It's where they came up with the world's first modern public school system, which everyone else copied. And they even created the modern research university, the model we still use today. Just incredible. Now, you've probably heard of Prussia, right? You're probably thinking helmets with spikes, rigid discipline, military. But this story pushes back on that. It argues that's a total misconception. The idea is that Prussia was, at its core, a creative, humanistic society. And all that military stuff, that was just them being forced to defend themselves because of where they were on the map. And here's where the narrative gets really, really tragic. The story goes that after World War II, the Allies didn't just win the war. They made a conscious, deliberate choice to completely obliterate Prussia, to wipe an entire civilization, its culture, its history, right off the face of the earth. Okay, Section 3. Separating fact from fiction. So that's a powerful, super emotional story, right? But now let's see how well it actually holds up when we put it side by side with the historical record. Okay, take a look at this timeline. This is where things get really interesting. The legend points to 1945 as the year Prussia was destroyed, one single event. But the history books, they tell a more complicated story. The independent Kingdom of Prussia was actually gone way back in 1918, after World War I. And its final official end as just an administrative unit, that didn't happen until 1947. So it was a process, not a single act of destruction. And this difference in perspective, it goes all the way to today. The story we've been hearing paints modern Kaliningrad as this, bleak, stale Soviet city with zero culture. But what do you actually find if you go there? A vibrant city of 500,000 people, with museums, with theaters, and with its own unique regional identity. And that's a really key point. Yeah, you can see Soviet-era buildings there, for sure. That's part of its history. But calling it a Soviet city today, that's just anachronistic. It doesn't make sense. The Soviet Union hasn't existed for over 30 years. Okay, Section 4, the kernels of truth. Now, this doesn't mean we should just toss the whole story in the trash. Absolutely not. Because like any good legend, this one is wrapped around some very real, very important kernels of truth. And this is where pretty much everyone agrees. Fact checkers, historians, everyone. They all say, Yep, the story is spot on about Koningsberg's incredible importance as an intellectual hub. It's totally right about how groundbreaking its educational systems were. And, most importantly, everyone agrees that its destruction was an absolute, devastating cultural loss for the entire world. Section 5. Why this lost city matters. So, we've looked at the legend, we've looked at the facts. So what? What's the big takeaway here? What does this story of a lost city really tell us? Well, this whole thing isn't really just about dates and names. It's about something much bigger. It's about how we create and remember history itself. The story of Königsberg is a perfect example of how our understanding of the past isn't always built on a dry list of facts, but on powerful stories that really connect with us on an emotional level. I mean, think about it. The idea of a lost golden age, this amazing center of civilization just intentionally erased from existence, that's a powerful story. And it's not totally false. It has these essential truths about what was achieved and what was tragically lost. But it also smooths over a much more complex, much messier reality of politics, war, and shifting national identities. And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. How does a story's power change when it isn't entirely true? The dramatic tale of Königsberg might have some holes in it, factually speaking, but you can't deny its power. It makes you feel the weight of that cultural loss in a way a textbook never could. So it really makes you wonder, can a story that's not 100% true sometimes teach us more than a simple list of facts ever could?